All right, everyone, we're going to get started. For those that have just joined, again, my name is Benjamin Nault. I am the head of the Early Career Committee of the Atmospheric Science section of AGU. And before we get to the panel, I wanted to talk about some terminology that you might see within United States higher academia that you might even hear today, or you might see in job postings, as September, October tends to be the time that the most job postings are listed. And a lot of the slides I'm going to be presenting real briefly are going to be very text heavy, so I'm not expecting you to memorize or write everything down very quickly. Instead, you'll be able to find the information in the atmospheric science resource page that we've created. I highly recommend going there to look up prior discussions and panels that we've had, as well as other resources that we put together in helping find jobs and how to look for jobs. So real briefly, there can be a lot of different terminologies for the types of universities out there: R1, R2, PUI, doctoral professional universities, et cetera, et cetera. And all this comes from the Carnegie Classification of Institutions of Higher Education, and they're defining a university on the combination of what is a professor doing at the university and how much money is the university bringing in for research. So an R1 university might be the one that you're most familiar with, where the professor has very high research activity, meaning they're doing some teaching, but they're spending a lot of their time doing research with their group, bringing grant money in. And a higher proportion of the teaching that occurs in an R1 university may come from graduate students and or adjunct professors, especially for the entry-level type of courses. An R2 university has high research activity where they expect the professor to teach first, so they might be doing 1, 2, most of the time maximum 2 courses per semester, and they're doing some research, but they're not as research focused. A doctoral professional university still has research activity, but doesn't meet the qualifications of a research university, meaning that they don't award more than 20 research or scholarship doctoral degrees per year and don't receive at least $5 million in total research expenditures each year. And then a PUI is a primarily undergraduate institute where the professors spend most of their time teaching. They still do research, but it's not as large of a focus. And Professor Ann Paring may be able to discuss more of this when she talks. And then there's a bunch of other classifications, including different types of master's colleges, baccalaureate colleges, associate colleges, special focus institutions, and community colleges. Now, for different types of professor positions that you might see, there's adjunct, where they only do teaching, and many times they're only focusing on entry level and they're teaching multiple courses. And a lot of times they're not full-time staff members. So you might be working multiple universities to try to get the amount of hours that are equal to full-time. A visiting scholar or professor is a lecturer or professor from another institution who's invited to teach at a different university or college for limited times, or like maybe 1 or 2 semesters. Some universities are now posting positions like this for temporary positions that they need someone for 1 or 2 semesters to teach. An assistant professor is a beginning level professor at a university that teaches and does research. And then to get to associate level professor, you need to obtain tenure. And then within the administration side, there's different levels. There's the very top level, that's the presidents and chancellors that oversee the university and the report to the board of trustees. Then below the president or chancellor are the provost or vice president, depending on what they want to call it. They're senior academic administrators, and they have oversight and supervision of the curriculum, instructional, and research affairs. Then below them tends to be the dean, who's in charge of a department or a school, depending how the university breaks the different schools or departments down. And then there can be departmental chairs. That's typically a tenured faculty member in charge of the department. And within that, there are many other positions and opportunities within administration that deals with grants, outreach, diversity and equity, student retention, mentoring, et cetera, that Dr. Christine Weidemeyer can discuss during her time. And then within academia, there can be different roles of research. There's obviously the faculty member, who tends to be in charge of a research group. And then there's a research scientist who typically has a PhD level, works under a faculty member, and can generally have fewer responsibilities than faculty, though they perform a lot of the research for the group and they assist in writing manuscripts and proposals and may still run the lab and or lead mentoring of students. Then there's this one called shared resource specialist. So think of like the mass spec lab or the NMR lab that you might have with chemistry or biology. It's a resource area that is shared amongst the department, a bunch of research groups, and a person in charge of that can have a bachelor's, master's, or PhD. They're doing the hand-on work with the shared equipment with the scientists throughout the institution and may assist with the designing and running the experiments and analyzing of the results. Then within the shared resource group or in the actual research group, you may have a technician or other support staff, generally bachelor's or master's, it can be PhD, and they're conducting the research under the faculty or the research scientists. They tend to conduct the research designed by the faculty and or research scientists and doing exactly what the person's asking them to do. And Dr. Loretta Mikley can talk more about this during her time. Real briefly, real quick advertisement. As I said, I'm head of the early career committee, and December is when we start looking for at least one new member to join our group. So if you're interested in joining the early career committee, please reach out to me. My email is bnault, N-A-U-L-T, @aradyne.com if you're interested in learning more about the early career committee and might like to join. Now with that, I would like to start the panel discussion. So we have Professor Ann Paring, Dr. Christine Weidemeyer, and Dr. Loretta Mikley, and they're going to start with doing a quick 2 to 3 minute elevator introduction about themselves and real briefly talking about what their day-to-day is like at with their job. Professor Paring, if you would please start.
Sure. So my name's Ann. I am a professor an assistant professor in the chemistry department at Colgate University, which is in upstate New York. Although we're called a university, we only offer a handful of master's degrees, so we are a primarily undergraduate institution. And I started at Berkeley as a grad student, and then I spent almost a decade at Noaa as a research scientist in Boulder, Colorado. And I'm now in my 4th year here as an assistant professor. So I've tried a little bit of everything. And I guess, yeah, so my day-to-day life, I do teach a lot, although I think I teach less than you think I do. I teach usually two classes a semester, and you get a semester off before tenure and another semester off after tenure, and then after that, it's a credit system, but most people wind up taking about every 6th or 7th semester as a research semester. And we also, just to keep in mind, like the year is 2 semesters for us, at least on a semester program. It's 14 weeks a semester. So that's 28 weeks a year. And the rest of the year is whatever you want to do. In December, that means you're resting and recovering and trying to get ready for the next semester. But in the summer, that means you have like a 14, 16-week summer that is research. So right now, most of my time in the school year is still spent trying to figure out how to teach classes, because I'm almost always teaching a new class still, which is different than research institutions, I think. But certainly my colleagues who are post-tenure, I think it works out to about 50-50 if you integrate it over the year, how much time they spend thinking about research versus how much time they spend teaching. And the only other comment I'll say there is that PUIs spread a huge gamut, much like research institutions do. So I happen to be at one that has high research expectations, and that is reflected in a lower teaching load. There are other PUIs also that would have double the teaching, and they would expect less or no research. And so if you're thinking about jobs, right, there are smaller departments, and there are, I think, fewer jobs, and they are very different depending on where you are. So I would be happy to talk to anybody who wants to know a little bit more about that landscape if that's particularly interesting, or reach out to anyone that you sort of have a relationship who might be in a role that looks like one you think you want, and ask them what their job is actually like. Yeah, sorry, I went over 2 minutes and I didn't even tell you about daily life, but I told you about yearly life. So there we go.
Thank you, Ann. Dr. Mikley, if you would please go next.
Sure. So my name is Loretta Mikley, and I'm a senior research fellow at Harvard. I co-lead the Harvard Atmospheric Chemistry Modeling Group. My research tends to focus on climate change, air quality, and atmospheric composition and human health. So it's very interdisciplinary. I work with a lot of different collaborators, and which is terrific. And my day-to-day life involves advising students, postdocs, and working with these collaborators, going over manuscripts, writing proposals. I'm not really under anybody except maybe the dean of the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. So being a senior research fellow at Harvard involves jumping through various hoops and proving that you can do research and raise grant money. So I think that in many ways, I'm like a typical research scientist, but with more independence than maybe some research scientists have at other universities. I think that's it.
Thanks. Dr. Weidenmeyer?
Hi there, I'm Christine Wiedemeyer, and I currently hold a position called the Associate Director of Science for the Cooperative Institute for Research in Environmental Sciences, or CERES, at the University of Colorado Boulder. So we are a large research institute that sits at University of Colorado Boulder. We also are a cooperative institute with Noaa, or the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, where we have a large tenure grant with Noaa. It's been in existence since 1967. And so Noaa gives us money and we fund research scientists to work embedded at the federal laboratories. I'm also a research faculty in the mechanical engineering department, which means that I have a vote and I have an affiliation with that department, but I'm not a tenured faculty. In my role as associate director, I'm primarily an administrator. So I help support the financial, HR, IT, communications, and just the scientific endeavor of our research institute. I've been in the position for 4 years, and prior to that, I was a research scientist at the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Boulder for 16 years. So I was solely a research scientist doing pure research. In my position now, I do a little bit of research. I'm lucky to have fantastic collaborators that still keep me involved because this job is pretty time consuming. It's definitely 110% of my time. Ben asked if we would talk about our day-to-day, and I never have the same day twice. I was looking at even today, I oversee CERES researchers in 7 different units at Noaa, and so I'm often having meetings talking about how things are going there. We're in the midst of writing our proposal for the next cooperative agreement, our next 10-year grant, so putting that together. Working with communications, that we have a good town hall for our members to talk about what's going on and meet their concerns. Just meeting, I have 20 direct reports. I spend a lot of times just meeting with my direct reports as well as grad students. I do serve on several PhD committees, and I do collaborate on several research projects, so I'm meeting with those. Yeah, so it's different every day. And which is exciting and great, and also yeah, I really like it. But yeah, so I'll leave it at that. I'm happy to answer any questions. And I will mention that within our research institute, we are university employees. The majority, we do have fellows that are tenure track faculty, about I think 25 of them. The rest are research scientists working on some sort of soft money roles, and we do have PhDs that head up our communications department, that lead and are like associate directors of different centers across our research institute. So there's a whole bunch of different roles that someone with a scientific background and an advanced degree can play in something like CERES.
Thanks, Christine. While we're waiting for questions from the audience, we'll start with one of the questions that was sent in to us during registration, and this will be for all 3 panelists. If you're especially interested in an institute or certain research group, but no open positions are currently advertised, what's the best way to express your interest in working there?
I'll go first. I think if you have identified a specific group within that research institute, I mean, of course, they're all different sizes, but for example, I would, and Loretta, correct me if I'm wrong, but like Loretta does amazing research, and if you're interested in working with Loretta, you might send her an email. Within our research group, I would recommend just reaching out to the leads of that group. If you don't know who it is, there might be a head, or, you know, my position is out there a lot all over our website. If you have any questions about the scientific endeavor, you reach out to me, and I would email, call, reach out.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Christine has said. I think even if there's not an advertised position, you can contact your favorite senior scientists in the field and favorite PIs and say that you've got this expertise, you've been working with this person, but you want to go in a new direction with you, and you have to be very clear about what it is that attracts you about that person's research. Don't just write a cookie cutter, plain old same email to every person. I won't answer. And so, but be very clear about what you can do, what you want to do, and who you've been working with. And then ask the PI if there are fellowships you can apply for. There may be fellowships specific to that university or something in NSF or Noaa. And really just keep reminding that PI or senior scientist that you're interested. And think broadly as well. Go to more than one scientist. Don't pin your hopes on one person. That's my advice.
I don't have
Any
any
comments
to that.
Okay. Our next question while we're waiting. When contacting a professor or a research scientist or associate to ask if they have funding for a position, is it better to ask for a postdoc position or a research associate position if you already have your PhD for at least 2 or 3 years?
Christine, do you want to answer that or shall I?
I can take a stab. So I think it really depends on the group as well as what it is you will do. Postdocs are typically a set term, at least in series, they're a set term 2 to 3 years. They have specific money tied to that. And then research associate positions tend to be more longer term, could have different roles and responsibilities, different multiple projects working on. It really depends where the funding is coming from and what the roles and responsibilities are. I would not recommend asking for a specific postdoc or research position. You might, if you're exploring with a person, you might want to just reach out and just say what kind of opportunities are there, rather than specifying a postdoc, unless you know you want a postdoc. Or if you want something long-term, you can ask what opportunities are for longer-term positions within your group.
Anne, do you want to say something?
I mean, I can comment. So I did spend time at Noaa. This has nothing to do with my job now, but it was very common that people came in as a postdoc type person, even if the title was not postdoc. And so the titles may be institute specific or group specific. And I wouldn't get hung up on the title. And it would not shock me at all that most places would be hesitant to do a long-term commitment to somebody that they'd never worked with before. So I think, yeah, express your excitement and express the things that you think you can bring to the table. And they will probably tell you what title they could associate with that and what openings they have. And I wouldn't worry about whether to take it based on what the title is. I would just worry about whether it's going to serve your long-term goals and diversify your skill set and make you excited to go to work every day.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to that. Just that some of these categories are specific to have definitions that are specific to the university. And so at Harvard, you can't be a postdoc if you're if you got your PhD more than 3 years ago. It doesn't exist for you. So just ask if there are opportunities, as Anne and Christine both suggest.
And the other thing to keep in mind is different universities or institutions have different bonuses that you can get with a certain title. So like University of Colorado is special in that as a postdoc, you can still apply for a grant and be one of the leads in the grant. And that's not something that always happens at all universities. So it's very university institute dependent. So try to understand the place before you even ask, and just ask broadly instead of saying, do you have a postdoc or a research position? Anne, I know you've been feeling a little left out. Do you have any advice for how to translate research you've worked on in your PhD or postdoc to your PUI context?
I think it's, again, I think it's less of a jump than a lot of people think it is if you're going to a place that wants you to do research. We're running a search right now, and we don't have very many applicants that don't have a postdoc, and we are excited about people that do have a postdoc, right? The expectation is not that you're going to support multiple grad students and salary and healthcare, right? The money demand is lower, but I certainly have senior thesis students all the time. The expectation is that I will publish papers with my students. The expectation is that I will get external funding to support the research that I need to do. It's just cheaper than it would be if I had to support grad students. And so you do have to be a little bit careful about, you can't choose a project that's going to require somebody to spend 2 years full-time learning how to do an experiment and then 3 years collecting data, because your students are going to show up, best case, somewhere in their first year, and they're going to be busy and they're going to be doing other things, and they're going to tell you they can only come from 5 to 7 p.m. on Fridays. Well, they won't pick Friday, but you do have to pick some projects that can fit into the slots of time that they're going to have. But I guess the other thing is, they're so excited and they're not jaded and they're not competitive. And so you can put a group of 3 of them together and they will hand it off and they won't be upset about it at all. And if they're all in the paper, they don't care whose name is first, and that they all get to go to the meeting. They're happy to have a friend there. And so I have found that there are really great students who can do amazing things in a summer. And so, yeah, you just have to pick projects that you can parcel out little bits at a time and then build together into a longer term story sort of after the fact. But I think a lot of projects are that way anyway, because it's hard for all of us to conceptualize of a 5-year arc of something until we've been doing it for quite a while. So.
Great, thanks, Anne. Next question is, how exactly does soft money, e.g. non-teaching or other type of places, research-only positions work at universities?
I can answer that. In my case, I pieced together my salary from an array of grants and very occasional consulting jobs, usually with the government.
Anything to add, Christine?
Yeah, I was just going to say, a lot of our researchers are fully self-funded. We do have a base funds through our cooperative agreement, and then we have a lot of people funded through other external resources. So it's a lot like Loretta said. It's piecemealing together multiple projects, grants. It does, and I was going to ask you, Loretta, like how much time you spent on proposal writing, and I know that we have some staff that are, it can be a stressful situation to have to fully fund your salary for 12 months or, however much. But I know a lot of people who are extremely successful at it and do a great job and are pretty happy with the flexibility and the ability to lead their own research programs.
And I think kind of another question to add on top of that is, if they don't get funding for, like, let's say 6 months or a year, what happens to that person? As well as, how often are you having to do grant writing, Loretta?
Compared to other professors at Harvard who are incredibly ambitious, I don't think my grant writing is any more onerous or frequent than theirs. And I'm happy to shrink or expand my group depending on how much grant money I have. I'm flexible. I'm very flexible.
Yeah, in some cases, if funding doesn't come through, people just have to exactly change their group size, reduce salary, if they don't have that funding. There might be opportunities for bridge funding through, other groups or through the Research Institute. I know that I've met several early career scientists who have struggled and have worked with multiple professors to fill in gaps, or in different teams to get money to fill in gaps, and then they do multiple projects to kind of cover the time while they're waiting.
And a slightly different way to look at it, for Anne, are you expected to obtain external funding, or is it just considered a bonus for your university? I know this can also be very PUI dependent.
It is very PUI dependent. So we are expected to try, and in practice, very few people are not successful at getting external funding. So the way our salary works is it's a 9-month salary. It is paid over 12 months, so you never have months without a paycheck, but you are allowed to pay yourself up to 3 months of your 9-month salary during the summer if you have external funding. So that's a good motivator for a lot of people. 33% more salary for the year. Students, there is really good funding support for students internal to Colgate, and that is probably common among PUIs that want you to do research, because just the way the grants work for us is a little different, and it's less of a lifeline, so it's more common for us to have years where we don't have one, I guess. So when you're pre-tenure, Colgate will fund 3 undergrad researchers a summer, no questions, and they'll do 4 or 5, especially if there's interest from the student side. They don't want to turn students away either. So that's great. And then if you get external funding, they're really happy to have you pay your own students. Post-tenure, they'd like to shrink that down to 1 or 2 a year that Colgate's funding, and you're funding some of them yourself. Certainly your own summer salary, they give you a bonus the first summer where they cover a little bit of it, just to, I think, give you a sense of what it would be like if you had external funding. And so the expectations for tenure are that you will have tried. And most people have succeeded by the time they get to tenure. And most of that is medium-sized NSF type grants. They're multi-year things that are probably $50,000 to $100,000 a year. But it's only the one at a time. And so then it goes for 3 years, and then you have to write a renewal, and then you get a renewal. Or there's littler pots of money from the Petroleum Research Fund, not for atmospheric people probably, but a lot of my colleagues talk about that as a funding mechanism for more in the like $30,000 to $40,000 range. So it's definitely a smaller fraction of the time that I spend writing grants, and it's less of a do or die thing. But they certainly see it as an example of a way that you are a functioning researcher who will have a career that they're excited to support.
Thanks.
Also, I should say there are pots of money that you apply to also. So
are those pots of money just within the university or the college? Both. Or okay.
Both. I mean, so yeah, there's internal pots of money, and Colgate is pretty good right now, at least about funding those, but also on a national scale. When you are coming from a place that's not giving doctoral degrees, you're not competing necessarily directly. I wouldn't compete directly against Loretta for the same grants, I don't think. Thankfully.
Thanks, Anne. For Christine, how did you create the opportunity to do research as part of your position? Is this common for administrative positions?
I'm laughing because this week I don't have any time to do any research. But one of the things is when I did come in, I did speak to that in my negotiations, that I would like the opportunity to bring in external funding if I have the time and capability, and to collaborate and continue working on some projects. It was definitely knocked down from 100% to a smaller fraction, but that was definitely negotiated. I think a lot of administrative positions are actually faculty positions in the university, so they're expected to continue to do research in the administrative positions and still continue to have grad students it was something that was important to me, so I made sure I spoke to that when I came in. I think my predecessor also did a lot of research, although the job has changed. But yeah, it was something I spoke to at the beginning. If I wanted to drop it all, I could. There's plenty to do on the administrative side, but I do like the research part, at least keeping my fingers in a couple of things. So.
The reverse for Anne and Loretta, do you have opportunities to do administrative work in your positions?
I run away from such opportunities. I try. I'm very lucky. Harvard has a wonderful administrative support staff here, and so there's really not much I need to do. Even when I'm writing a grant, I just have to write the grant. I have someone to put together my budget for me. We're really spoiled here. So yeah, I don't do any administrative work.
And at the PUIs, it's similar to, I think, a lot of research institutions where a lot of the administration is faculty who are temporarily circling through. So I'm thinking more about like dean's office type things. So short of like the dean of faculty who is hired and that is their job and they are brought in as the dean of faculty, at least at Colgate, all of the sub-deans are, and the division directors of, the sciences and the humanities divisions, those are all professors who are doing terms. And there is the opportunity to do that. It's all after tenure. They don't ask pre-tenure people to do that because they want you to be able to focus and also because they want you to know the institution a little better before you take on that kind of responsibility. And it comes, the ones that require a lot of time will come with a reduced teaching load or a quick sabbatical after you're done with your term, or no teaching depending on the position. And I think there's a mixture of people on campus whether they want that or not. And so post-tenure people will start talking to their friends and the deans and figure out what, what positions are going to need to be filled in the next 5 years that might be exciting to them. And then there are plenty of other people who say they don't want to do anything in the administration and they'd rather spend their time with their students and in lab, and then they don't. So it seems to kind of work out that there's just a diversity of opinions, and the slots get filled, but they are filled by professors. And I have no idea whether I'll want to do that or not.
Thanks, Anne.
Yeah,
and
I
Loretta.
want to say, I think that's a nice thing about a lot of science work is that those who gravitate towards administrative work and are good at it, they have opportunities to do so. And so we have Christine as an example of that kind of stellar performance as an administrator. But those of us who know better than to put ourselves in an administrative position, we can usually steer away from it.
I would say though, for both of you all, like you still apply your leadership skills by managing students and managing your labs and your groups and your teams. So, I mean, I think that is part of administration and management is really pure leadership. And I would say that you all do a piece of that regardless because you're running your groups. So just an aside, I mean, it's not academic administration, but it's still some leadership there. So
yeah, and I guess we also have, there's some administration that you just can't get out of. Like there's some department, when the department's running a search, you're part of the search and you are expected to be, it is part of what you're evaluated on for tenure that you're on certain committees. And pre-tenure, they try to give you committees that are less time consuming. But it's like, okay, somebody has to look over our employee benefits package and vote on it once a year. And so you're on the benefits committee, or, so there's all sorts of committees because the whole governance structure is the people who work at the place, which is nice because you can build the structure you want and it costs you a bit of time sometimes, but you can kind of control how much time that's going to be.
Great. This is for all panelists. What was your career path prior to your current position? Did you transition directly from your PhD program to a job in academia? Did you apply to an open call for academic positions, or were you lucky enough to find a job opening that was specific to your research topic?
Can you just say the first part of that question again?
What was your career path prior to your current position?
I mean, I can start, I guess. I don't know. It's not that long of a path, but it's winding. So no, I did not start this position straight out of grad school. I went to a postdoc at Noaa and then transitioned to a longer term person at Noaa and was really, really happy there for 9 years. And then I started applying mostly because my husband was also a scientist and he was also in Colorado, and we were looking at the options for getting 2 jobs in the same place, and they were just slim, right? So we started looking. We were lucky enough to have jobs that could continue as long as we needed them to, but we started looking, and we applied very broadly, and we got some interviews, and then this one was one of them, and then even then it took a couple of years for them to figure out how to get both of us in the door here. And when I left grad school, I think I was really scared about the funding side of it. I did not want to go to a research institution. I did not take, I didn't apply for postdocs at Caltech or MIT or the places that would set you up for an R1 career, because I was terrified of the millions of dollars a year that you need to bring in to support graduate students. Like, you just do the math on how many people need healthcare and a salary and how long they're going to spend in your group and how many people you need to do what you need to do. And it sounds like a really scary number. Then of course you sort of sit with it for a while and you see your peers doing it and you realize that that's, people do it. I still don't, I'm not one of them, so I don't know exactly how it happens, but people manage it. And so I was excited about, I really love the teaching side of it, and I really love being able to be in lab with my students and not have to spend as much time writing grants. Even though they're younger students and they need more help, right? I have to be there, but I also really like being there with them. So I think for me, this happened to be a really great fit, but it wasn't the thing that I was aiming at when I spent 9 years at Noaa. It was the door that opened that fit everything that we needed for our family, and it still feels like we won the lottery, right? My husband and I have offices next door to each other, and we have our 2 kids in daycare half a mile away, and we bike to work every day, and we eat lunch together, and we hang out with our students who are wonderful people, and and we're really happy. So I guess one message that I would send to everybody who's watching is that there are so many paths to happiness, and you should just do whatever is interesting to you, right? Just follow your nose and try different things, try to figure out what makes you happy, and then think about, like, what really do you need for your life? Like, for me, it was, I need access to outside, and I need, not a 2-hour commute every day, and I need intellectual engagement and some control over my time. And when you put that kind of requirements on yourself, you're less likely to feel angst over the thing that you're not doing, right? Just do the thing that makes you happy, and if it makes you happy, then great. And if it doesn't, try something else.
Agreed. Loretta,
Christine?
do you want to go?
No, you go.
I can go. So I didn't know what I wanted to do after grad school. My professor, I came from a big R1, and I was horrified at how much my professor worked and how overwhelming it sounded. And I also had the opportunity to work with the labs in Boulder when I was in grad school. So I had exposure to the research scientist world at Ceres and Noaa, as well as at NCAR. And I ended up taking a postdoc at the University of Denver, and then I got a position at Ceres within the same lab that Anne was in. And then I went to NCAR, and I was a research scientist there. I loved it. I loved it. I love my research. I love the people I get to work with. I love NCAR. But at some point, I wanted to do something bigger. I really appreciated understanding how a bigger organization works and what goes on to support good science. There's so many amazing people out there, and like what it takes to really make sure that they can do what they need to do. And I really got interested in that. And this position at Ceres came up, and I was fortunate enough to get it and decided it was the kind of place to transition to. One thing I will note is that, it did take me time to get to the position I'm in, and I did find that I did have to publish. I did have to build up my scientific creds to transition into this position as well. Like, so not only are leadership skills and administrative skills necessary, but I think the scientific credentials were really necessary for me to be effective in this role. And so, it, you know, it might be frustrating for some, but I think publications, building up your scientific credibility, and really having a strong research background is important for doing scientific administration and leadership. So yeah, I'll leave it at there.
So my turn. I came to Harvard as a postdoc first, and after 3 years, I transitioned to be a research associate, that term that we mentioned previously. And like many young scientists, I went on the search circuit and was offered a job at an R1 university. And I thought about it and I thought about it, and I decided to stay here. It's not a decision that I think many of my colleagues would understand, but I really liked being at Harvard. I liked the students. I liked the kind of collaborations that I could set up here. I felt this was the place for me, and I would get the kind of independence and flexibility that I really value. As I think Anne mentioned, being, and Christine as well, being a professor at R1 university really is very demanding. And I wanted more balance in my life. I wanted to stay here and work with students and really focus on what I knew I could do well and where I felt most useful to the world and to science. So I decided to stay, and then within some years, a few years later, is when the wheels started turning to promote me to a senior research fellow, which required, I don't know, a massive number of letters being written in my support. And like Christine, I had to show that I had a past. And also it helped me a lot to have very interdisciplinary work with lots of collaborators who needed me, people in the health field, people who are field chemists. So it helped to have these collaborations to propel me forward, to propel my group forward. So I've stayed, and things have pretty much worked out. I've been very lucky here. That's
Great.
it.
Thanks, everyone. This one is for Anne, and also I'd like to point out when I'm asking this question that we had a webinar in July that was about working in government labs, so you'll be able to access that government lab webinar and see what our panelists had to say about working in labs then. But for Anne, what would be the most significant difference between working in a research institution like Noaa Lab and working in a university?
Well, I went from being among the youngest person in my group to being ancient in like 5 minutes. But it's hugely different. I loved both of them, but they're very different. So, and I struggle with parts of both of them, right? At Noaa, I was in a group that was doing a lot of field work. And so there was a seasonality to our lives where you'd sort of try and get yourself ready for the field work, and then you'd go on the field project and it'd be really intense, and then you'd try to take a little break, and then you'd come back and try to write your papers. And I struggled with the long chunks of time where there weren't deadlines and there wasn't a rhythm to the week when you were in the 6-month phase where you're supposed to be just writing your paper. And I tend towards procrastination. And so that was hard sometimes. You know, it was fine. I did eventually get around to writing my papers, and now in my job, there's always a deadline, and often it's tomorrow when you're going to stand in front of your classroom full of students and have to say something useful for their educational trajectory. And so I really like that rhythm, and I like the rhythm of the semesters. And I find that I can really focus in the summer because I know that I'm not going to do that all year, right? Then I struggle to try and finish everything because it's really hard then to find the chunks of time. But I think that will get better as I am less desperately preparing for every lecture. Somebody when I started said it would be about 8 hours of prep time for every hour that you had to stand in front of them. And I thought that can't possibly be true. And it was, and probably then some. But then eventually you do get to where you're a professor, you just show up and you can say what needs to be said with just a minimal amount of prep work. I have faith that that happens at some point when you've taught it enough times. I'm definitely less than 8 hours per hour now. So now the struggle is just trying to like finish everything. But I think it's possible, and I don't actually think it's going to be that huge of a penalty on productive time doing research because time is just more full, kind of. Yeah, and there's more dynamic, there's more people coming through the door, but there's also more distractions, right? There's always something else you could be doing. So it's really important to mark out your own time to do the things that need to happen. And I'm learning how to do that, but I was learning how to do that at Noaa with different constraints and winding up with similar complaints about myself. And we're all getting to know ourselves and how to motivate ourselves.
Thanks, Anne.
Can I just say something too? Just one of my observations from my friends who are faculty or tenure track and teaching faculty is like, as a research scientist, I had to do everything that they were doing, and then they have to teach and do a lot of the the service of the department or the university. Yeah, doing an all research job is it can be definitely more focused than I think teaching is, and this is my observation from outside, so you all correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, I think you're doing and you have a lot more responsibilities and pulls on your time. So,
but I will say it's kind of, I mean, I guess this is another thing that I like about the PUI environment. But like a liberal arts school, there are some classes, right? Instrumental analysis, the ACS dictates that we must teach them certain things, and I must teach them those things, and I'm happy to do that. And that class is pretty constrained, or Gen Chem is very, very constrained, right? We're going to get through these chapters, and it's going to happen this semester, whether you like it or not, and here we go. But there are other classes where I get to kind of play, and you get to spend several months thinking about how do you craft a storyline that 16 freshmen are going to be happy to engage with, and you get to try it, and it's okay if it's not exactly what you pictured the first time through, and then you refine it. Like I do really like having a different kind of thing to focus my brain on, that's sort of a longer arc, lower stakes thing, and I feel like, at least for now, and yeah, we'll see in a decade how it feels, but it feels like almost it hits the same buttons as research almost, to build a class that I think is just interesting, and to build a syllabus of readings and start to have some conversations with some young people about what they think about this thing, is satisfying sort of the same way that starting to map out a new manuscript is also.
For Christine, how do you translate your years of research experience into an administrative level position requirement?
Yeah, Loretta's laughing. You know, I mean, it's true. I think that's really individualistic. I think one of the things, that I saw as a research scientist working in national labs, is I always looked for leaders that could understand my situation and recognize what I needed to succeed, and could see bigger pictures and bigger opportunities. And I think I used that, what I wanted in leaders, to try to be that leader. Now, whether I am or not is a different question. But yeah, I think, yeah, it's what I thought about as a research scientist in these bigger organizations. What would I have wanted as a research scientist to be better, to get out there, to do better science, for our organization to succeed? And I took that with me to this job. And then a lot of it was learning by fire hose. So yeah, like a lot of stuff I had no idea what to expect, and I just got thrown into it, and I wasn't prepared. So yeah, but that's what I like about it. It's been an incredible learning opportunity. Not only do I get to still be around amazing scientists and learn about incredible science, every day is something new, and the people around me are just brilliant and doing crazy awesome things. And then I get to understand how the organization runs to enable them to do what they need, or bang my head against the wall because I can't help them. So, but yeah, so it's hard. There were some things that really helped me coming into this career, and then a lot of things that I just learned on the fly. And I think a lot of scientific administrative positions are like that, because research scientists go into these positions and we're not trained. And there are a lot of training opportunities, and I think it's worthwhile to take advantage of them. If they're offered, if that's something that you're interested in, take leadership classes, take management classes, crucial conversations classes, a lot of, understanding your personality style and how you work with other people is really important, how you work with groups and teams. Yeah, so I don't know if that answered the question, but there you go.
Thanks, Christine. For the entire panel, do you have any advice for those who have spent time in industry but would like to find positions in academia?
Can I just say something? I went to grad school with a really amazing woman, and she went and worked in consulting for years after our graduate program, after she got her PhD, and then decided she wanted to go back into academics. And she ended up taking a postdoc, even though she was 5 years past her PhD, so I don't know if it would work at Harvard, but she took a postdoc, a temporary position, to build back up her academic career, to start networking again, and now she's chair of her department. So, and a full professor at her university. So I've seen examples of how this can happen. I would think industrial experience or experience in the private sector would be really unique and interesting for a department to bring on, because you do provide that different perspective than someone who's just been in academics the whole career. But sometimes you do have to go back and build up your academic CV before you can jump into a faculty position, build up your publications. Yeah.
I think it also probably depends on what kind of industry they mean, because it could mean anything from a little startup that's doing, well, maybe, I don't know. I think a startup would count as in small industry, at least, where you're doing lots of research and you're doing lots of, sort of the equivalent of grant writing, but it's for early funding of new tools that might be useful. And so then it's just a question of sort of like repackaging it and explaining to the hiring committee what it is that you have that they might want, or that you have been building skills that will help you be successful in your next job. Or maybe you have to go back and jump through a hoop in academics to build back up your CV. But
yeah, I mean, I know a few people who've done the industry back into academia. Not very many. I think it requires some willingness to drop your salary, be be humble, to be learning new things again. And I would recommend that for anybody, really, that humility when you're going from a graduate program to a postdoc. I would encourage people to, branch out, try something new, go to a group or go to start research that you're not immediately comfortable in. I think that could be useful down the road and very exciting down the road.
Thank you, guys. I have two more quick questions. So first one, do you have any thoughts about getting a position for you and your partner in the same institution, the infamous two-body problem?
I could take that one. I don't have any advice, but I think it takes luck. I mean, you got to be in the right place and you got to be ready. I mean, I also think there are gutsier ways than the way I did it, right? I waited until there was a place that was ready to take both of us at the same career stage. He was younger, so he had been in a postdoc for less time than I had. So another pathway would have been for me to be gutsier and go on the market when it was sort of the more normal time for me to go on the market. And then just trust that we could figure something out for him later, or we move pre-tenure. And the same way that I was a little terrified by the grant writing side of R1 life when I was a student at Berkeley, I shied away from that kind of uncertainty when I was in my postdoc in Boulder and I was having a great time and there was a postdoc down the road that he could come be, you know, come have his job. So it did work out for us. I think for us, it was partly because we're in a remote place, right? They had 2 retirements that happened to open up 2 lines that we were matched for. We are not in the exact same subfield, so that I think that in our case helped. In other cases, it might not help. But we are in the same department, so that helped too. And in other cases, it might not help. And then you just apply for a bunch of things, and I think you just gotta ask, and you might be surprised at the answer. But in a place like this, they have a hard time sometimes attracting the candidates that they want because people are afraid to move to a town of 3,000 people without a spouse, right? Rightly so. It will be hard to find somebody to spend your life with if you don't bring that person with you. Or they bring that person here and then that person hates it here because their job is not what they were hoping for. And so they knew that those were problems that they had and they were willing to work with us because we're probably never going to leave now. And we're perfectly happy to imagine that we won't leave, hopefully, if we get tenure. But I have seen it work other ways too, where someone's a postdoc at the same institution that someone else is an assistant professor, and then you negotiate or they move. But it always involves luck, and it always involves both of you just, you know, you got to work and you got to publish and you got to, if you're going to be doing that, you better be doing something you really are excited to spend a lot of time thinking about. And then when it's time to jump, you'll be ready to jump.
I have nothing to add.
Great. The final question, Christine, is kind of for you, but for everyone. What are the resources available for trying to find positions, including professorships at PUI, research associates, administrative positions, cough, cough, your email listserv that you created, cough, cough, Christine?
Yeah, there's a lot of different places, and yeah, Loretta and Anne might be able to speak to the academic positions, but we run the ES Jobs mailing list that has about 120 job openings a month, and so that's grown pretty large. There's a ton of different listservs depending on what your expertise is. I know there's an ecosystems one, the climate modelers through NCAR have another one, CESM. Indeed.com is actually where a lot of the universities have been posting positions these days. Also, the Chronicles of Higher Education for the more academic jobs. So there's a lot of resources out there, and it's just a matter of keeping track of them all. Yeah, and if you're looking, just I would think as broadly and as big as possible, because you never know what shows up. I mean, I just saw a PhD requirement for climate come up for Amazon.com the other day. So who, you know, like, who knows what kind of positions are out there? And a lot of, like, I know all of our positions at Series get posted through Indeed. They're on the university websites, grants.gov for government jobs, listservs. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, on the academic side, there are like sort of ad hoc blogger type lists for subfields that people use a lot for people like us in these interdisciplinary areas where you might be applying to various different departments on a given campus. It's a little harder to find one of those that's the right fit, but you can kind of scan all of them and see if something comes along that looks like a good fit for you. But yeah, I think the ES Jobs Net for people in atmospheric sciences is the one where if there's anybody at the institution who knows that they would tolerate an application from a person in atmospheric sciences, they will probably post it there, hoping to find applications.
Anything to add, Loretta?
No, I have nothing to add.
All right, it's 4:01 now, so thank you everyone that came to attend for this. Again, this has been recorded, so you'll be able to find it on our resource page and look it up and look through the recordings again, as well as the PowerPoint that will be posted there about different terminologies within academia. And I would like to thank you, Anne, Christine, and Loretta, for taking time out of your day and doing this. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me too.
And nice to see you all. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you again,
everybody.
everyone that attended.
Oh.
Okay, I'm gonna hop off. Nice to see you all. Have a lovely
Thank you
day.
again, Christine.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thanks, Anne.
Good job, Ben.
Thanks.
That was like, I learned a lot from that, so that was really good.
Yeah, it was fun trying to figure out how to work all the questions into like one or two easier ones.
Yeah, totally. I understand. All right.
Thanks for setting this all up, Alyssa, and thank you, Greg.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. I think we can just leave and it should be fine. Greg should have the recording.
Yep. Right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.